It's certainly, I think if I went around the room and asked every single one of you fraud managers to define enterprise fraud for me, every single one of you would probably give me a slightly different definition as to what's included and what's excluded. So we've got some amazing people to come share their experiences about enterprise fraud with you today. I'm going to marshal you through our time. We're here for 90 minutes, so don't go running away. We're going to lock the doors. It's going to be a deep dive, but it's going to be lots of little vignettes. And we're trying to really paint a story for you, right? We're going to ask Julie to give us some amazing insights from Datos in terms of research and analysis they've done and surveys around enterprise fraud. So that's kind of what's going on in the market. And then Julie and Eric and I are going to talk a little bit about, well, those are great themes. How are people actually getting on and achieving that? How far have they got in enterprise fraud? Is enterprise fraud just a nirvana? Is it something that we're never going to achieve? It's just a direction. And then we're going to hear from a couple of great customers who are going to give some practical examples of how they have deployed an enterprise fraud program and talk through the challenges and lessons learned and so on and so forth. And then, of course, it's great to do all the fraud detection we'll talk about and have great tools and systems and policies and org structures and stuff like that. But we can't forget the customer in this as well. So I'll give you a little talk about how FICO platform capabilities can be used to deploy very complex orchestration flows to meet those enterprise fraud challenges. And then Eric and Vince and I are going to talk about the consumer part of that in terms of how do we engage the customer and treat these frauds, and how do we make it a consistent experience from their perspective so it feels like they're working with one fraud department, not 5 different teams. Okay, so enterprise fraud is definitely being, shifted constantly because of the continuous innovation of new products, new capabilities, new channels, new ways to market. And the challenge is we still have to deal with, I think it was 1830 when the Bank of England and Lloyd's banking group, or maybe it was a different bank, issued the first paper check. And here we still are in 2024, still issuing checks. So a lot of the fraud challenges never go away. The payments landscape is evolving quickly, and the exposure vectors that we're dealing with are constantly changing. And even just when you thought you got to grips with it, that, all the fraudsters went digital because of COVID, then actually, yes, they've stayed digital, but they've actually gone back to some of the old frauds that they were doing before COVID. So it's a constant cycle of you think you've taken your eye off something, and then suddenly they're going to hit you again. There's a lot of concern and uncertainty, especially in the payments landscape globally, around who actually loses the money in this crazy new world we're in of scams, right? Is it the issuing? Is it the bank sending the money? Is it the receiving bank? What responsibility does the customer have in this? What about those that aren't even involved in the payment but caused the scam in the first place, like the social media companies or the telco providers that allowed something to happen and be distributed? And then I think the other challenge as well is that many of you might look at your own organizations and say, I'm enterprise fraud, but in reality, the credit card guys are over there, and the debit card guys are over there, and the deposits people over here, and the payments people are over there, and the internal fraud groups over there, and the application fraud teams over here. And the customer doesn't understand. They just see one bank name. They don't understand you've got 14 fraud departments. So why am I getting treated differently by all these different people? One person I could resolve it via an SMS. The other one I had to call in to an inbound call. Somebody else was actually asking me to get something in the mail and sign an affidavit. They're not getting a consistent experience. So I think enterprise fraud is still a journey. I don't think it's a final destination because of what we just talked about. I don't think we'll ever get to the end. But you still need to have a North Star. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What is enterprise fraud? What do people think about? I'm going to invite Julie up, and Julie's going to go through some of their research. But that's what this is about. Do you have a direction, and what are you doing to achieve what you can do to balance that fraud and customer experience across products and channels? So over to you.
Thank you, Adam. It's always hard to follow Adam, but especially when he's wearing those snazzy silver shoes. They're awesome. We've got
5 empty chairs. If any of you guys that are standing wants to take a seat, we've got one at this table, one at that table, one over there. So yeah, if you want to have a seat, feel free. 90 minutes on your feet, it's a long time. But so I love this topic because to Adam's point earlier, we have been talking about this for a long time because there's so much potential, so much opportunity in coming together as a more holistic enterprise fraud strategy. It's been a lot of talk, but I think we're starting to gradually actually also see the corresponding action on this front. So for those of you I don't know here, I lead the advisory teams at Datos Insights. We're a global research and consulting firm. All of us used to have our sleeves rolled up in industry, either in product management or strategy roles at banks or fraud vendors, and now we're bringing that to bear by kind of having this bird's eye view on the trends in the industry. So as we look at enterprise fraud, Adam has already kind of spoiled the punchline, but there really is no one-size-fits-all answer to this. It is a topic that we've been following really closely, and I have some relatively fresh research that I'll be sharing as part of this. But I think part of the reason that there's no one-size-fits-all answer is there's so much complexity when you talk about enterprise fraud. It's a very big term with a lot of underlying subtopics within it. One of those subtopics is just looking at fraud policy, fraud strategy, and fraud operations, and the extent to which at financial institutions, they've brought those two functions and concepts under unified umbrellas. As we surveyed large financial institutions in North America on this topic last year, as you'll see here, it's by no means a one-size-fits-all. About 2/3 of those that we had surveyed, a little over half actually, do see that fraud policy and fraud operations is united under the same leader. But notably, there were almost 1/3 of the institutions that we surveyed do not have that. Fraud policy, fraud operations report to 2 separate leaders. We asked a similar question around fraud and authentication. Again, very close cousins and united at many institutions, but half of the institutions that we surveyed as part of this, and again, this was large North American institutions, said that fraud and authentication report up through separate silos. Part of all of this lack of standardization when you say enterprise fraud management and enterprise fraud strategy is really the lack of standardization across, especially in the North American market, just the various payment types and the payment rails. And there are so many different siloed payment instruments that on the business side of the organization are in many cases starting to come together, but the fraud shops aren't always necessarily following suit as quickly with their strategies around managing the fraud on these sets of rails. So one of the questions that we asked as part of the survey last year was, to what extent, as you are modernizing your non-card fraud strategies, are you consolidating risk controls across these rails? And as you can see from this bar chart, we've got the bars all over the place. The strategies are all over the place. Only 11% of those that we surveyed have already consolidated their fraud strategies across all of their non-card payment rails: ACH, Wire, SWIFT, Zelle. 18% have done one or more. Notably, 43% of those say, we've got investment dollars earmarked to do this, but we haven't started yet. And 11% aspire to do this at some point in the future, but haven't really started yet. And this is just non-card payment rails. That doesn't even consider the fact that in many institutions, card is its own completely separate fraud silo, as well as payment silo in many cases as well. So I think this underscores that, yes, we are seeing movement, we are seeing aspiration, but the reality of doing this is complicated and it's hard. Now, the good news, again, having been in this industry for many more years than I care to admit, and having been following this topic during all of my 14 years at Datos, is that we are seeing progressive change. And I do think we are seeing the change on this front accelerate. I think there's a lot of drivers behind this acceleration, and we're going to be talking about this as we go into the next part in the panel discussion around this. But as we look at, again, going back to this survey, and actually this was a separate survey because disputes, it's another piece of the whole fraud problem. Many times disputes is a different separate organization reporting up to card ops, but it goes hand in hand, both on the non-card and the card with fraud. And so we did a very recent survey just a couple months ago. You guys are actually the first external group to see this data set. And we asked, to what extent has your financial institution consolidated its fraud and dispute functions? We actually launched this piece of research because a few of our FI clients are right in the thick of this, and they wanted to know what their peers were doing on this front. As you can see here, it was interesting. 36% say that this is all now a single function under fraud. In most of these cases, this was relatively new. It had just happened in the last 2 to 3 years. And the color commentary we got is we are seeing enormous benefits of this. Just the shared data, the shared intelligence, the shared ability to target your first-party fraudsters because you have visibility into that data now. 36%, equal percentage, still completely separate functions. 9% say, yes, it's separate, but we're reevaluating it because we are hearing some industry buzz about the benefits of this from the folks that have been doing this. And another 9% were already in the process of doing this. So we're seeing, again, movement, change towards more consolidation on this front. And we're also seeing, like I said, slow and steady progress towards enterprise fraud management as we ask folks the extent to which their fraud org structure as a whole has changed over the past 3 years. You can select all that apply. As you can say, 7 of those that we surveyed said, we've gone from a more federated structure that we had before, where we had very much pockets of silos tied to specific payment instruments or specific channels. We're bringing that together into a more holistic org. One just said that we've seen the fraud org move from risk to operations. We've seen that the larger fraud unit split from the parent unit and moved into a different unit outside. And then there was a big bucket of others. And the others were, half of them said, well, 4 of them said, because you can't do 3.5. 4 of them said that we haven't seen any changes in the last 3 years. We've been pretty static. The other 3 said that because we have such focus around specific and hot topic fraud types, we have stood up bespoke units around scams, 2 of them are around mule detection, so we could get an intensive focus on that within our fraud organization. And as you look at why we're starting to see this acceleration towards change and why we are seeing that this is a different dialogue than it was back when I first started looking at this for Datos back in 2010, it's really because of some of those change drivers that Adam talked about at the outset. It's because we are seeing Fraud Inc. increasingly automated, coming at us with ridiculous volumes of attack, pristine data in many cases. And so this upping of the ante from a fraud attack perspective is really driving organizational change to become more nimble and more efficient. We're also seeing focus on OpEx, especially during soft economies, often drives a reevaluation of how we're doing things. Can we do things more efficiently, better? And then the other big one that we're seeing is just this focus on having fraud be part of that customer experience discussion. And as you do see this customer experience imperative and this desire to have a holistic and unified customer experience across your financial services journey, fraud has to be part of that discussion. And that's driving some of these organizational changes as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Adam, and I think we're going to launch into the panel.
Yeah, we're just going to do a quick poll. So if I jump forwards, we wanted to see where you guys were at in terms of stuff. So if you get your phones out and then scan the code to participate. I think I pressed this button here, is that right? Control Alt. Where's delete gone? Yeah. Oh, sorry, mate. It's password locked. good to see we have good security at FICO. Okay, have you defined enterprise fraud management end state, and how close to completing it are you? Interesting. So 21%, so 1 in 5 of you have not defined the vision yet. 26 to 50%, that's about half of you, quarter to half of you do have it. Interesting. Yeah, it's definitely one of those ones where it's like, I don't know, even if you defined it, whether you would call it an end state, right? Because it's going to evolve next year. So let's move to the next question. All right, what are the top 3 impacts you face without mature enterprise fraud management? And we're trying to touch on the angles here. What's most important to you? Is it protecting customers? Is it losses? Is it the regulatory impact? Is it liability, reputational risk? No one cares about the regulators, it seems. So that's
Yeah, I was just going to say.
oh, hang on. A few people have realized there's a question about regulators over there, and their boss is in the room. They're like, yeah, I better get the model governance team who sat behind me over here. I better say yes to regulatory action. Interesting. So the leading one, which is actually great to see, fraud managers thinking about protecting and improving the customer experience more than reducing the fraud losses. Yeah. So that's certainly a good one. All right. And then our last question here. Is what are the top 3 challenges you face in achieving holistic enterprise fraud management? Is it budget? Is it separate lines of business and portfolio management? Is it staffing, level of technology, fragmented systems, or getting the right staff? Expertise and skill sets.
Yeah, that's where I would go. That's where I would go. Yeah.
Well, it's like we paid the audience to say,
yeah, this is
fragmented technology systems. This is like fantastic. I'm like, ka-ching.
Very well done, Adam.
That's exactly what we wanted to see. Now, of course. No, but it is. I mean, that's what we're going to sort of dip into now, right? Because fraud is constantly evolving, let me try and go back to the other slide and move forwards one. I think, go forward a slide. So when we think about the enterprise, I wanted to use this little wheel for us to have a little chat and touch on what Julie was going through then, right? So, I mean, it starts a little bit with org structure and ownership. Now, I remember earlier on in my career, it was all about having a center of excellence for enterprise fraud. And I remember aspiring to be the enterprise head of fraud one day, right? And then something came in where there were these like first line of defense, second line of defense, third line of defense, and then teams seem to get fragmented around. How have you seen your customers, or what have you at FIS had to do in terms of your org structure to achieve enterprise?
Yeah, it's a great question. And those that might not be familiar with FIS, we work with literally thousands of financial institutions of all sizes. And so I would say that I've seen the largest of the organizations start to break down some of these walls, some of these silos. There is a long tail of smaller financial institutions, community banks, credit unions, smaller players that have a long way to go here, where I still do see quite a bit of segmentation, of fractured type of approaches. As I was watching through the respondents, we were commenting because that the fragmented systems, along with the people that are often fragmented as well, makes it highly, highly complicated. And at FIS, we have, I feel we're in kind of a unique position. We're also a very large core banking provider as well. So we see all the core data along with payments. And so even internally, whereas we are not a financial institution ourselves, we spend a lot of time empowering and even some of our solutions, and I'm sure we'll get into this more as we talk as a panel, we've started to connect these a little bit better, even if it's just the underlying data. Because quite frankly, we do empower a lot of channel and point solutions. FIS takes their own proprietary solutions to market. But at the end of the day, what we've really started to focus on is just kind of aggregating and bringing all of the historically disparate data attributes together to find better signals and respond quicker.
Yeah. Going back to something, Julie, that you were mentioning about authentication and fraud as an example, right? I know a number of banks have tried fusion centers, and if you are separated, you need to have really good engagement, really good communication, be aligned on strategies. In your survey or in the conversations, are you seeing more of that happen when people are fragmented, that they're starting to go, well, I can't put them under one leader, but I can at least try and get my AML and fraud guys together in a fusion, or I can get my authentication and IT and fraud together, or my credit risk and my app fraud team, or my HR and my internal fraud team and my account takeover team? Like, what are you seeing clients do?
That concept, I think, is another one that's starting to pick up some momentum, and it's another one we've been talking about forever. But as we are seeing some successful examples of fusion centers that are having some real effects, then we're a close industry. We talk, and so those stories get out. The best practices around those get out. A good friend of mine stood up one of the first big bank fusion centers in North America a few years ago, and he talks about the fact that first 9 months was hard, and
Yep.
You've got territoriality, you got
Finger pointing.
politics, you've got these places where you've got overlapping technology between fraud and InfoSec, and fraud wants theirs, InfoSec wants theirs to be the ones. But he said once you got past that first 9 months, and they had a very strong C-level support for this, once you start aligning individual personal objectives against the success of this fusion effort, he said we started not only better leveraging our data, we started better leveraging and aligning our authentication strategies, because in their case, InfoSec had been managing their customer authentication strategies, which doesn't always work well. And they also found gaps. They found pockets of gray where InfoSec thought that fraud had it, fraud thought that InfoSec had it, and nobody had it. So I think
And that's exactly where the fraudsters get through, right? Yeah.
So those kind of best practices, I think, are encouraging others to start going down that path.
Yeah.
Well, and fusion centers sound cool, right? Like, everybody wants to be part of a fusion center. We started some of this last year, and I don't want to call out any particular. I also know a very large bank that has had a lot of success, and if you're interested after, we can talk and I'll direct you to the right people. But we started a fusion center last year with the combined assets of FIS and WorldPay. That is spun as two separate organizations now, but we're still very close, call us sister companies, whatever. But that was it was the cyber guy, the cyber team kind of coming in, starting the concept of bringing, I always used to love 24/7 eyes on glass and all these cyber terms. And that's allowed us to kind of bring together a lot of the signals across at least a simple use case of acquiring and issuing that often don't talk either and connect. So I'm seeing a lot of that fusion center concept kind of sprouting across clients of all sizes.
And then when we get into this aspect of saying, well, enterprise fraud means break down the silo, so be cross-channel, be customer level, be cross-product, right? And then, well, how do I make sure that the right data from the right other channel with the right other element gets to the next channel at the right time? So what lessons can you share about, like you just said, like, I had data all over the place.
Well, that's it.
Where did you start that journey?
It was like, we started with it sounds crazy, but an entity resolution model. We just needed to be able to connect all, and if you look internally, even within our own data, we didn't even use unique or common identifiers for all of our clients that use different solutions. And that made it very challenging to start. So, basic step one was we created an entity resolution model, started bringing this together. I mean, it was really born out of FIS. I was working with a client a few years ago, and it's a common use case, but they had a lot of signals happening. New commercial deposit relationship was established. Then, a few days later, some sub-accounts were established, some basic ACH activity, taken in a vacuum, none of these signals really looked concerning in and of themselves. There were some small, low-level alerts, but by the end of, a month-ish, 45 days of activity, they had tied debit cards to these accounts, they had requested ATM increases on the cards, and they cashed out through the ATM. And when we sat back and kind of looked in retrospect, again, all of these individual signals in the point channels, taken in a vacuum, you probably wouldn't have necessarily done anything different. But if you could have connected all of those dots, we could have jumped in much, much earlier and confident that we could have stopped an ATM cash out scheme if we would have connected those dots. So that's really where we were born. That was the infancy of where we saw the opportunity, and we started working, like I said, to bring the data together and try to identify those signals quicker.
So looking at kind of where your exposures were, which were your highest risk levels, look for extra data sets that could be pulled together. But I mean, it's true, even when you think of sort of cross-channel, right? I remember when the UK had launched chip and PIN, suddenly all the losses went up on credit cards, bad debt losses. Everyone was like, what's going on here? And we'd realized that these guys had the first-party fraud. It was really starting to become a thing that we were classifying. Then when we connected the dots, we were looking at all this write-off on credit cards. Then we went back and found out that they'd actually placed the DDA account 5 years before chip and PIN, because you couldn't, it took a good while to mature a synthetic and fabricated identity in those days. And you're like, smart guys.
The long
They
game.
knew it was coming. They put the accounts in, and then when we went around, we were like, oh my God, they've got an auto loan, they've got an overdraft, they've got a line of credit over here. It gets pretty big, right?
It does. It does.
So, a couple of other things, right? Technology, an area that you can perhaps give us some. How, when we look at the fusion of things like that, and I'm going back to this authentication and fraud area again, how important is, if it's impossible for somebody straight away to start with an enterprise platform and they have to get there over time, what's your view on how important orchestration is between siloed systems to get the right data to the right other system at the right time? Are you seeing people focus on that, or what's your views, Julie?
I do think that is a focus, although I will say that word orchestration is one that means probably as many things to as many people as enterprise fraud management does, maybe more, because when you talk to the cyber guys about orchestration, it means something totally different than fraud guys. But when it is getting right data to right place at right time, that is something that, that's been one of our biggest obstacles to enterprise fraud, is that is hard. But some of these orchestration tools is facilitating this and taking some of the hardness out.
Yep.
So I think it's a very buzzy buzzword, even though it means a lot of things, but there's a reason for it, because it's serving a purpose to help us advance along this path.
Yeah, and it's very easy for us to talk a lot about, it's very easy for us all to just go into the transactional space, right? But with so much synthetic fraud and bust out and opportunist, how do you think either yourself or your banks or people that you engage with are managing to deal with that across the credit life cycle? So there's not just like, we find sometimes that like app fraud isn't even done by the fraud team. It's being done by another group inside of credit risk. And then there's another team looking at bust out stuff in another part of account management, and another team looking at it in terms of trying to eliminate out of the collection queues. So how are you seeing people kind of do that, deal with first-party fraud, when it's not just across products and channels in fraud, but it's now truly enterprise, it's every department across the life cycle?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And unfortunately, recently I've talked to a couple of clients that have learned about it the hard way, quite frankly, because they were pretty siloed. It was your typical, making a payment on my credit card, ACH transaction gets revoked 30 days later, I'm over my credit limit significantly. And they recognized that, they had multiple teams in the middle of things. Looking at ACH payments wasn't even really connected to the thoughts of the credit card team. So, I'm seeing some people kind of having the aha moment the hard way because they've taken some losses and suffered through it from that perspective. And then, we are starting to see even just simple things like how many people are actually mining through their data for serial claims abusers. And that sounds simple, but I talk to a lot of clients in an FIS. Sometimes, we're trying to provide the data to empower. Even at FIS still, we have very distinct chargeback processing teams versus, the frontline defenders, so to speak, or the prevention side. So Unfortunately, some hard lessons, but I think those lessons are also being understood by everyone, and I am seeing an absolute movement. I would just encourage just start somewhere. Even if it's a couple of channels. When we started putting ours together, we really focused on AML, deposits, ACH wire, and then card payments. Those were the initial channels that we started to bring together. This year now we've brought in some of the items processing, which is like check imaging and some of the check, what's old is new again that Adam referenced. And then we've got our P2P and bill pay is the next area on the roadmap this year. So you can iterate your way to success. It's important to kind of get some momentum going. And I think just start somewhere, find a couple of channels and start pulling it together, particularly from the data side.
Yeah, I'll take it in two separate tranches. So I think, first party fraud, where it is really Adam willingly just disputing, knowing full well there's not going to be a lot in the way of consequences probably. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing a lot of financial institutions taking a new look at their policies with Visa and MasterCard introducing the liability shifts recently. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of motivation to kind of figure out if Adam's done this once or has he done it a dozen times, and if so, let's escort him to the bank across the street. Synthetics, before the pandemic, we were seeing a lot of movement around synthetics and getting better at detecting them at the front door and also analyzing portfolios. At that point, I saw the synthetic responsibility shift to fraud in a lot of FIs. Then the fraudsters took a break from synthetics in 2020 and 2021 when they were focused on the entitlement programs. Mm-hmm. And the results of that is those synthetics now nurtured a couple extra years, and the bust outs are incredibly painful right now. So synthetics is one of the top 3 topics we're hearing from our FI clients right now. And again, we're starting to see that portfolio analysis generally led by the fraud teams, but trying to figure out how we can both analyze on the back end and also tighten the controls on the front door, which the good news is there's some decent tools out there to do that now.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thanks. We're going to jump off and we're going to hear from some from clients who are actually doing this today and see how they've done their programs. Thank you so much for the amazing insight. So before we do that, we have a chance for another Menti poll. That was the last one, so here we go. What 3 business objectives are you looking to improve with enterprise fraud management over the next 18 months? So what are you looking to improve if you have your program? Is it react to threats? Well, yeah. Reducing customer impact, reducing losses, customer impact equally. That's nice to see them balanced. Operational expenses. Capital expenditure? No? So you all want to spend more money on software? That's great. Hardware? That's awesome. Grow the team. Yeah, so it's interesting. Like everyone's on a different journey. Everyone's starting at a different place. But everyone seems to be quite balanced with the, it's always the losses, the new changes, and the customer experience. That sort of trifecta. All right, next question. What type of scams are you seeing? This one's like a word chart. So I'm putting this one up just to see. I think you have to type a word in, because we have a categorization model for scams, and I know FedNow has been working on one, and Zelle have one, and lots of different markets, but I just wanted to see if you will call them the same thing or not. Like, are we going to end up with 50 different types of scam type names here? I'm asking because we like you to send this data to us when you're our solution. We like you to tag it. Elderly, fake employee, fraud app, synthetic check, phishing, Quakers, spear phishing, impersonation, social engineering, gift cards, disputes, first party. I think the challenge is there's so many different things. How are we going to keep on top of naming them? I think what's been done so far is a good start to classifying it. But I think unless we all start together in certain geographies and do like you how it would have with Visa and MasterCard, where we can all agree on what the scam types are. How are we going to be able to share this back and forwards? How are you going to be able to prove whether you're liable or not when contingent reimbursement models and things like that come to play? So I think it's a good one that we're going to have to write some more blogs about, right? What are the scam types? And let's get them defined. Okay. Next one. What are your top 3 capabilities to implement as part of your enterprise fraud management strategy in the next 18 months? Is it get some of that amazing third-party data into your systems easier? Is it better case management? Focus on scams? Omni-channel engagement? I've lost all the other options because it's gone away. Now it's come back again. Improved dashboards and reporting? Ability to run my own models? Link analysis, wow. Very evenly split. No overarching winner. Well, the good news is we can help you with all of those things. All right. Well, thank you for giving us the insight. I hope that insight was also useful for yourselves to see how your answers compared to others. Next up, Ulysses. From Itaú, the largest bank in Brazil, I'm pretty sure. You have a lot of customers, so I'm super interested to hear how you tackle enterprise fraud.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So guys, good afternoon. I'm Ulysses Okamoto, currently responsible for fraud prevention at Itaú Brazil. And I'm gonna be honest in here. I rehearsed one thing, I'm gonna improvise and change everything just after seeing the results of the surveys, everything that you answer. So we're talking about pretty experts, so I'm just gonna change everything. Let's see how it's gonna go.
It's real-time fraud management.
Exactly, and I'm gonna try to add in here additional experience and information. So let's see like how we leverage that. Awesome. But just to give some major figures about Brazil, Itaú, for your context in here, Itaú is the largest Latin America bank. It's been in the market for 99 years, so this year is a special one. We're gonna accomplish and complete our centenary. So, very important one, market value of $68.6 billion. We are present in 18 countries across Latin America, North America, Europe, of course, our headquarters in Brazil. We are LATAM, as of March at least, we were LATAM top value brand. We have over 95,000 employees in total, plus 65 million customers, and our portfolio pretty much comprises and embraces everything that we have for financial products and service for both individual and corporate customers in all segments. So pretty much these are the major highlights. And honestly, in here, I just brought one slide to talk about enterprise fraud management. Majority of you probably are familiar with some sort of diagram and schema, but I'm just gonna draw your attention in here to some points. And before, actually, I talk about the things and share the information that I plan to, I just wanna make a quick survey, an extra one. No Menti, it's just like a manual one. Yeah, hands-on. So like I'm just gonna ask, please to raise the hands those that are managing fraud under the Agile methodology. Okay. So I'm just gonna draw your attention and share more experience about it. Of course, Cauê from Itaú as well does not count because we work together. So it's less one. Yeah, what I want to share with you in here, in addition to all the colleagues in here already mentioned, some experience about managing fraud risk under Agile methodology and using OKRs. First thing, what is actually in our enterprise fraud management program? The answer is everything that we need to ensure that we're going to deliver the remarkable customer experience that the business units want, but also a safe one. So this is what we are considering in our enterprise fraud management program. Everything, in terms of resources, discipline, expertise. Second question would be, based on that, how do you guys define your strategy? So this is the piece that we are still learning. We have been operating under Agile methodology and this new business approach for, let's say, around 2 to 3 years now. And what really changed from the way that we used to manage fraud risk in Itaú in the past is that we changed the driver. So now, what defines our strategy, the framework that we're gonna adopt, is really the business driver. So our business teams, they define how they want actually the customer experience, the journeys, the products, the service, the channels, how they wanna offer that and deliver. And based on that, we, fraud risk team, assess and evaluate the inherent risk and make the recommendations of the set of capabilities, controls that we believe they should have in place. Both to ensure that customers will be secure and safe while operating with the bank, interacting with the bank, and also to make sure that we're gonna have the fraud within the business or the agreed business risk appetite guardrails that we established together. So this is the baseline of our enterprise fraud programs and the grounds. So second thing is actually how Agile methodology has been operating over there and how we are actually capturing value. First thing, we decided, and I'm just highlighted in orange coloring here, what it's our driver. It's the customer experience. So everything that we do, it's based on the customer experience. And based on that, we decide how we're gonna manage and what capabilities of fraud we're gonna develop to ensure that. And instead of just having the traditional indicator or goal for fraud loss or basis points, we decide to adopt the OKR approach. So this is really nice because in the end, what we are seeing is that we established a set of key results that we're gonna pursue together. And for all of them in here, I just mentioned some of them, generic ones, but we can see, as we were seeing in the prior presentation, that we have everything. Customer experience first, how we actually wanna deliver and accomplish the customer experience goals. We do have risk management indicators and key results, efficiency of cost, the total cost of fraud, how we are spending operational expenses and etc. And the digital transformation, which is how actually we are moving towards where we wanna be in terms of technology and capabilities. So there's no more a single goal, a single indicator as we used to have in the past, driven by fraud losses, but instead we do have a set of OKRs. And for those that are familiar, OKRs are not fixed one. So you decide which ones, you define target, you define roof shots, moon shots, and according to the way it's going, kind of this presentation, you're gonna adjust in that and see how they are performing, and if needed, you can always adjust on the way. So this is a good thing. The next one that I wanna call the attention is how we are divided internally in order to make sure that we're gonna break out silos within the company and within our own organization. One thing is that the traditional fraud risk management framework and model, which it's pretty much represented in here by the arrows, prevention, detection, handling, and treatment, we group them and split in different teams with a specific capability. So in prevention, we do have people that are in charge of partnering with the business and products team. So most of them are product managers. They have the background with product delivery and product management. And this is one important, one of the perhaps most important experience and results that we are already capturing here. These people, they are deployed on the business units teams. So we have been operating in Itaú under Agile methodology, most of the business teams, business units. And we do have fraud specialists deployed in each of these tribes and squads. So they are the ones that are timely assessing, evaluating risk, and making the recommendations to the business teams. This way, we ensure that we're gonna have security by design at the right moment. And everything that it's gonna be developed in terms of products, service, channels, we're gonna be created and implemented with all the proper security controls that we need to have. And then we have detection and handling and resolutions teams. We split this in the run the bank teams and the build the bank teams. So we do have in here the traditional fraud strategy and fraud operations teams that we just saw in the prior surveys. But also we do have in here delivery teams. And this is another experience that we are having with breaking the silos. So particularly in this piece, we do have technology partnering with the risk management teams. We do have multidisciplinary teams, squads. They are in charge of productizing fraud security. So their goal is to develop products, security products, that they can offer for all the business units, and whenever there's a need, they just can help themselves pretty much on our shelf and implement the capabilities that the fraud prevention experts recommend to the business teams. So pretty much this is the dynamic, how it's going. Good thing is that as opposed to what we believe in the past, that in order to tackle and manage well fraud, you needed to impact the customers, this model is teaching us that actually you can achieve everything. When you work under this organization, you can, at the same time that you are reducing losses, reducing fraud expenses, you can also deliver a better customer experience and also improve the level of productization that you have in your portfolio. So this pretty much the additional experience that I would like to share. And in addition to that, we do have these cross disciplines that are supporting the whole methodology, and we do have specialists also to manage the matters related to people, to process, products, technology, and data. Okay? Pretty much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulysses. I loved how you brought a plant for your own survey in the room. You know, a couple of hands at the back there. Very good. But I love that approach. I mean, fraud is very agile. So why not use that agile methodology? That's what we use to build software. Why not apply that to your actual enterprise fraud team? So I'm going to talk a little bit about enterprise fraud management and how you can achieve that with platform. And I'm going to preface it with, I think as we've seen as a theme, one size doesn't fit all. I think as we've seen, everyone is at a different level of maturity. People are on a different objective. People have different North Stars. So FICO Platform gives you an incredible way of, almost like Burger King, defining the fraud solution capabilities and orchestrated in a flow together to fit your model, to fit where you are and your level of maturity. But I wanted to start with this diagram here, because this is just a small representation of how complex, as Julie pointed out, how complex things have kind of become. So imagine a simple journey whereby somebody is logging in with a new device, navigating around some pages, gets sent an OTP, maybe changes an email, wants to move some money, sets up a new beneficiary, gets stepped up again, asked to confirm the payee, ask them why they want to move the money. Are you sure you want to move the money? Are you really sure you want to move the money? Would you like us to move the money tomorrow instead of today? And then finally, the money gets moved, right? I think traditionally what we've thought of is like, let's get all those signals together, and then at the time the money's being moved, let's analyze it then, right? When in reality, the way technology is today, this is a digital journey. All of these things can be done in flight, in real time, as they're happening. And now, as I go through the flow and I'm like, okay, I get the login information. Go update some profiles. When did they last log in? How many logins have they been, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Where's the device? Call threat metrics or whoever. Where's the geolocation? What's the score on the device? Has it been jailbroken? What operating system is it? Is this the usual channel that they come in on this device from, and so on and so forth, right? And then, I need to navigate around some pages. So maybe I'm calling BioCatch and they're looking for scam signals and they can see how you've moved the mouse through the screen. I think you get the point. I'm not going to slavishly go through, but what we've really done, what you're doing here is you're decomposing your big fraud system into lots of little mini fraud systems that you're putting in the digital journey as it's happening. Why would you want to do this? Well, one, it helps balance friction and customer experience. It helps you put friction in where you want, but it allows you to green lane more people through. So when I show this to some people in product and marketing, they're like, oh my God, this looks like you're going to be putting so many restrictions and controls and friction on the client. And in reality, what you're doing in this flow is to identify as quickly as you can through the journey, think of like a traffic light system, who's good, who's definitely bad, and who do we need more information on to make a decision, are they good or bad? And you're trying to do that as fast as possible. Historically, it was very difficult to get all this data into your fraud engine in time. Technology's changed. You heard this morning about open APIs. We already have 140 of these vendors that give you all of the data up until the point of move the funds, right? They can tell you about the login, the device, how it's navigated around pages, OTP, biometric information. Some of those vendors are actually here sponsoring our event, partners. So think about that. I think it's about decomposing it. Now, what I can also do is balance how much money it's costing me to get all this data. So rather than me having to go and send everything to Email Age or everything to Threat Metrics or everything to another vendor, I can just selectively send the people that I think are risky and send that through. And now I can balance my cost of buying all this data because it will get expensive over time. And the other thing I'm going to point out about why you have to kind of really do enterprise fraud is, imagine this is not even a cross-channel example here of some money being deposited and then a debit card activity and then some activity on a retail banking account. This is really almost just one channel coming through. But as you can see already, the challenge we've got is you don't necessarily know as you're going through the journey, is it fraud, is it scam, or is it identity? And you don't know at any single point, but the collection of the breadcrumbs helps you determine that with more precision. So what I mean by that is, like, if you did some stuff because you thought it was account takeover, but you've confirmed it's not account takeover, it might now be scam. So it moves into a different treatment lane. If you think something was scam, but then another signal came in the middle of the journey, actually maybe it's not scam, maybe it's an account takeover. Put them back down the other path, and so on and so forth. So how does FICO Platform help you with that? So when you think about, and this is funny because your slides and this slide look very similar, right? Which is to say, both of you and Eric yourself, right? You've just been doing this, which is to try and get all of the different channels and data together. And I think what we recognize is, Julie talked about fraud and authentication fusion, right? So there's an element of identity and authentication that's happening. I personally think we in fraud should be managing that. It shouldn't be. I agree with what you're saying. It shouldn't be IT security. They can do, if they want to octomy 500 times a day as an employee, that's totally fine, but don't do that to my customers, right? And then really it's about layers, right? It's about analytics, profiling, decisioning, case management, and then engaging with the customer. And to do that, you use your own data, third-party data, and then to understand how all that's performing, you need the stuff that's kind of not in the flow of the decisions, but helps you make better decisions. Dashboards, reporting, governance, observability. And so in reality, that's kind of what we've done with the platform. You saw this slide this morning. And so I'll just take you through these columns super quick. Data is all about how do we get stuff in. So making it easy for you to, I'm sure all of you are fraud managers in the room, have so many vendors that come to you going, I've got this amazing new API, this fantastic new technology. It'll slash your, your synthetic fraud. It'll improve your detection. It'll save you more money, et cetera. And you guys want to play around with them. Well, FICO Marketplace now is going to have more and more people putting their APIs in there, and it means you can start challenging vendors against each other. Find out what perfect combination of this data works for you. And all of that, take all of that headache of you and your IT teams having to manage and maintain and keep those things up to date. But it's also about making sure that you've got data transparency. So this spaghetti mess of enterprise fraud, well, it would be a spaghetti mess unless we have a way to ensure we understand where the data came from, we understand where it's going, we can meter it, it's full observability, and it has full transparency. So that helps correspond and contribute to when we do things like model governance and the decisioning downstream, that you've got the entire sort of history of how that data came through. And more importantly, things that we need is high performance data flow. So you can't do that diagram that I showed you up on the screen if you're sending, your non-mons in batch and you're sending a file in here and there and you're grabbing some data. This is really giving you the ability to build what I would call like very, very real time at the end, like milliseconds at the end of that journey, and probably near real time, as in milliseconds and small numbers of seconds in the upfront part of the journey. The thing that we love as fraud is profiles. That entire flow that I showed you, every single one of those boxes had a question on it, which was like, how long since they last logged in? Has anyone else used this thing? Every single one of those is a feature or a variable that you guys need to build. The advantage of now with a platform is that you build them once and you can now reuse them, not just within the fraud team, but actually across the entire enterprise. So if you were looking at things like synthetic or first-party fraud, but there were some really predictive variables that the account management team or the collections team or other people had, for example, cure rates or something from the vintages of delinquency, and they've got some interesting features, et cetera, you can leverage those in your strategies as well. So it makes it easier to share. Think of how many of you in a bank have a variable, how long since the card was activated, as an example. How many different teams across the bank create that same variable? That's what platform's allowing you to do. Analytics, there's some sessions on that, so I'm going to jump past our consortium for a moment and just move a little bit into the decisions. But more importantly, the business composability. So it allows you to build those workflows. So that diagram that I was showing you on the screen is actually what you'll do with inside a FICO platform. You can go in and build for every payment record, every feed that's coming in, every type of event, non-monetary that happens. You can just stitch those together and decide when you want to invoke a model, when you want to invoke a rule, or whatever. So if you want to hear more about the platform and all these slides, please come see us at the Solution Center. But given we've only got a few minutes left, I did want to touch on the last part and invite Eric and Vince up onto the stage and talk about the last bit of enterprise fraud, which is the engaging with the customer part. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you.
Hello, hello. Hello. So, we've done all this amazing work. We've got all our cross-channel data sorted. We've got our customer level strategies. Now it comes down to engaging. I remember in the old days of managing the call center, right, when you slavishly walked around, you're like, 20 cases an hour, come on.
Bring down the AHT.
Yeah. But actually, the ability to automate that has been mind-blowing. I remember Adeptra, actually, before we bought Adeptra and it became CCS, I was blown away. I went to one fraud department, and they only had 5 fraud analysts. They had automated 95% of their inbound and outbound. That was mind-blowing. How, you're a user, you offer these capabilities. How do you balance, Eric? What do I send to automation, and what do I have my humans do?
Yeah, it's really bang for your buck, I guess, for the lack of a better cliche to say there. We're using automation as much as possible in what I would call like the low-hanging fruit. There's things that you just don't need to spend a lot of time on. And when we automate those type of activities or those particular alerts, for lack of a better word, that's really going to free up your finite staff to go and spend time, dig deeper into really what's more important or what's much more worthy of investigation. I think about the analogy that Adam had just said about, the common traffic light. I mean, you can automate the green, you can automate the red, that's pretty obvious, and then you can put most of your people resources and your real smarts on that yellow layer that is just blinking caution, but we need to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. And what do you think, Vince, in terms of are all cases that need to be resolved worthy of automation or human treatment? So for example, scams, right? When we think of scams, why would we want to use automation more than a human to do that, as an example?
Yeah, I mean, I think that similar to fraud transaction verification, scams actually is something that could be highly automated, right? So, I think similar to, again, making sure that we have that real-time engagement that can happen more consistently than with a human agent. We also have other tools that we can incorporate as part of that communication flow. So, like in the UK, for example, we deployed Scam Signal, which is a real-time signal that we can get from the network operators, specifically to determine some signals that correlate directly with scam, right? So specifically, whether the customer is currently on an active call, the call duration, and the call direction. And depending on the levels of each of those things, you can then change your communication strategies on the fly, and then you can then convert that conversation into, hey, we need to talk to you right now. So then the human agent can take over and have that. So, but a lot of that interaction can be automated, just like we do in transaction verifications today.
Yeah. And when we think about how this type of engagement with customers started, it was literally that, right? It was transaction verification. Hello, Mr. ABC, with account number ending this, that, and the other. I saw a suspicious amount for this amount of money. Did you do it, yes or no? But things have evolved, Vince, right? Can you give us some other examples of how we can use automation to drive a consistent experience across the fraud lifecycle, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about scams, so we can go a little bit further there, right? So, it's really interesting. You can't tackle scams in an automated way the same that you do with fraud transaction verification because from a customer perspective at that point in time, this is a legitimate transaction, right? So you're gonna get confirmed genuine if you apply that same strategy that you have today. So you need to shift gears there and you're gonna shift to something that's more personalized, that's more custom based on demographics and different information that you have, and start to have more of a dialogue with that customer to kind of get them to a aha or a oh crap moment as to where they say, okay, I really need to speak to somebody, right? So that's a really important use case. And then I think as part of the overall life cycle too, you can introduce non-monetary notifications, right? So account changes, your mobile banking has been set up, a third-party application now has access to your data, all of those different things. And then one last thing I will say is, one of the use cases that a lot of our customers or several of our clients are really starting to take advantage of is around fraud claims, right? So, automating that part of the process where you're providing status updates to the end customer through that entire claim cycle really frees up the agents to really focus on actually resolving the cases versus having to do 3+ outbound communications per fraud claim. So what that resulted in about 50% reduction in call center volume and about 25% reduction in processing times.
Super interesting. Eric, your views on that, because I think something
Yeah,
you've also been looking into recently.
Yeah, I was going to pile on a little bit to Vincent's comment. We did roll out account change text alerting last year, which I really call account takeover prevention or scam prevention. And the platform was very flexible for CC. What I liked about it wasn't your typical notification that's just informational. It wasn't, here's some information and check it and then give us a call. This gave us the ability to actually, if you didn't recognize the PIN change, the email address change, the address change, you could actually text that back. We'd shut down the account, why we could go and actually do some investigation on your behalf. So I think that was super helpful and well received across the clients that we've been able to roll that out to so far. And then, I will be honest in the fact we're not quite there yet. We're having the conversations now, but I think the claims management piece, the dispute piece, I mean, here we've created an experience where, you know, they can, through a digital channel or an SMS or a push alert, that they can validate suspicious activity. You can take it that far, but when you confirm, you know, now you're going to go back to, you know, 3 phone calls and don't laugh. We got some clients still taking paper faxes. I mean, I bet there's some people in the room that don't even know what a fax is based on your age. So, you know, just bringing that dispute, you know, resolution.
What's a fax?
Yeah, all right. Exactly. Hey, birthday boy. I know how birthday boy is.
Everybody
knows.
knows.
No, I'm kidding. Unfortunately, Adam and I probably plugged in the first fax machines or something. I don't know, but we're about the same age. So, I mean, just when you think about that type of experience, and that, you know, those are some conversations we're having right now. We definitely have clients interested in kind of completing the swing, as I say. You know, you take it through a digital channel, you know, a non-paper, non-call type interaction, and then you get to the disputes process, and you think you're back in the 90s or something. So, I think there's a lot to go there. To your point, yeah.
I think one of the areas I'm seeing some improvements as well, and I think there's more improvements to be had, and something I know Vince and I talk about at times, is that too often, even when we're doing transaction verification, it's kind of vanilla messaging to it's the same message to all customers, right? Whereas in reality, if you think about the experience somebody's been through, you've got a segment of customers in the bank that you've defined as like high net worth, you know, multi-product, new to bank, VIP, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's segments that we have that I don't think are used as much in fraud. So for example, I created a case on you before, I called you, and it was not fraud. And here I am again, a month later, creating another case on you again. Why are we not leveraging the prior thing to deliver a different message this time? Or somebody was a prior victim of fraud and has now become another victim of fraud. Or so what do you think in terms of, like, you know, getting more specific and tailoring the messages more to make them more hyper-personalized, to make them feel like they are delivered to me as an individual? Because that's honestly, I think, what the fraudsters and the scammers have tried to impersonate.
Yep.
They've tried to impersonate the boring text messages that we send, right? Hey, this is Bank 123 asking about transaction ABC for value 456, and can yes, no, did you do it? What's your views? Are you seeing clients do that, and what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'll quickly go to Vince here for a second, because I'm of the opinion there's a lot of work to do in that space. I mean, I still do see you know, a lot of the same flavor for, you know, different types of interactions and different types of channels. And so I agree with you. I think the effectiveness of being able to tailor, we've heard a lot about empathy as we've gone through here on the consumer side, giving them that comfort, so to speak, and not kind of a generic message. So I'm of the opinion we have a long way to go there. I think we've got some work to do, but I know you're empowering people today with that very thing, right?
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, there's probably 2 points that I want to make there. Is one, today, you know, talking specifically about our omnichannel engagement capability, right? You know, we have the ability to, you know, select the contact strategy or change the contact strategy, including the you know, the text of the message or the IVR message, et cetera, based on historical rules, right? So based on previous history, you can flip the script, right? And depending on the different attributes of the variables, you can segment that customer into having a completely different conversation, right? So that's something that's available today. That said, it's fairly structured, right? And so I think that, you know, one of the things we're doing is we're moving into conversational AI, right? So first, having more natural language conversation between your virtual agent and the end customer to be able to then create more flexibility, have more like an open-ended conversational dialogue that can be more empathetic or can provide more flexibility. And then obviously then evolve into starting to figure out how do we leverage generative AI and large language models to start to even take that to another level in a responsible way.
Yeah. The last thing I'm just going to jump past this for a moment, but this is the other thing I wanted to ask both your opinions on, right? Because, and all of you out there that are using your own solutions or other people's solutions, but
the convergence between mobile identity, insight, and data, whether it's scams, account takeovers, and fraud detection, has never been better, right? So Vince, talk to us a little bit. I know it's challenging. It's not always available in all markets, and some things are, and it's heavily driven by, you know, the network operators. But there's definitely some really interesting signals that you're seeing out there. Maybe you could talk, and Eric, maybe you touch on, are you able to get any of these for your clients around the world?
Yeah, I'll just mention it quickly, and then Vince, you can go, because I know we're short on time here too. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, much of this, you know, when I look at number carouseling, when I look at some of the SIM swap detection, you know, these are components that we engage today, or that we have deployed today with your solution. And, you know, we have the ability to do step-up authentication where we need to, if we're suspicious when we are having a call center interaction and things like that. So I do think that, you know, the depth of defense and the different capabilities that you can kind of layer together in kind of the way that you're showing here provides a good set of protection, basically, for what we're trying to do to help the consumer.
Yeah, and I think Eric hit on a couple of really what we see as the best practice capabilities, right, around SIM swap detection and number carousel, largely because of the amount of coverage that's available and the efficacy of it all, right? So there are a lot of different signals out there to help us, you know, and our clients kind of make sure that that trust anchor that's been established between the customer's account and the phone number or the credential associated with it is still valid and this hasn't been compromised, right? So like I said, SIM swap detection, there's number porting detection, call forward detection, number deactivation database, and a whole host of different things, right? So, but you know, like I said, like we typically recommend kind of those two areas as focus, is the SIM swap detection and then the number carousel, which really helps you know, us detect inbound potential fraud, impersonations, spoofing, et cetera, for both the SMS and voice channels.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys can stay there if you want, but I think we're almost at the end here, and I'm conscious you've all got places to go. So thank you so much for attending. I hope you got some valuable insight. If you can achieve, even, you know, define a North Star, start walking towards it, you will get results along the way. I think you've heard from many of our speakers today on how they've achieved success doing this within their organizations. A few clients, you know, that have achieved these kind of successes as well have been, you know, fantastic using our capabilities. To summarize, I would say, like, you know, it's about, and I was really pleased to see that actually, it's becoming more about, you know, the customer experience and less about the fraud losses for me these days. Maybe I'm just getting older and I'm more conscious about society. But there's a lot to be had in terms of operational efficiency. If you can bring teams together and you can leverage automation, you can put your smart people, I think you said this, Eric, put your smart people on scams, put your smart people on the difficult challenges, and then the transactional verification things, try and drive as much automation as you can. I think it's important to, you know, we've all identified react to new threats. And I think that means we have to have agility and the flexibility to do that. That means getting more data, playing with it, seeing if there's signals, seeing if it adds value to the process. And in fact, you know, if you go as far as Itaú, they in fact run their entire fraud team in an agile manner so that they can identify to threats, react to threats quickly. So thank you for your time. And of course, tell us how we did. Amazing speakers. I just want to say thank you to all of you for coming.